The doctor watched the footage in complete silence. His hands were folded neatly on his desk, brows drawn tight, eyes scanning the screen without a blink. Then, as the video ended, he leaned back slowly and set the folder down beside him. There was no outrage. No confusion. Just a long breath, the kind someone exhales when a truth finally crystallizes. He looked at me, his voice low but steady. "Emily, this changes everything." I nodded, saying nothing. On the screen, the security footage had played like a short film, just 34 minutes long. In it, my mother-in-law, Sylvia Whitmore, laughed on a phone call, bent to water her houseplants, and carried a basket of folded laundry up the stairs without a hint of struggle. All of this took place exactly 2 hours after she told her son, my fiancé Daniel, that she couldn't attend our wedding because of her fragile condition. She'd claimed her doctor warned of a high risk of stroke. She said one wrong movement could end it all. Daniel had believed her. Of course he had. Until now. I didn't come here for revenge. I didn't want drama, and I didn't want anyone to grovel. I just wanted the truth to be seen, not whispered about or dressed up as concern. Because when someone tries to sabotage your wedding by faking an illness, they're not protecting anyone, they're protecting their power. Sylvia had always been two people. To the world, she was a refined widow with perfect manners and a country club smile. To me, she was cold calculation in designer heels. Her disapproval of me had never been loud. It came in compliments laced with criticism, in sudden changes of plans, in private accusations that disappeared when Daniel entered the room. But this was different. Faking a medical condition to derail our marriage? That wasn't just manipulation. It was war. And the thing about war is, I don't start it. But I do end it. I met Daniel 3 years ago at a community volunteer event in Austin. He was there with his company, and I was helping organize book donations for underfunded schools. He offered to carry a box I was clearly struggling with, and we ended up spending the rest of the afternoon sorting paperbacks and swapping childhood favorites like old friends who'd just been waiting to meet. Daniel was steady, soft-spoken, with a quiet intelligence that made you lean in when he talked. I was drawn to his calm, to the way he never interrupted, the way he actually listened. After a string of relationships filled with noise and drama, Daniel felt like deep water, calm on the surface, solid underneath. We dated slowly, intentionally. He met my friends, came to parent-teacher nights when I stayed late at the school, cooked on weekends when I was too tired. I learned that he'd lost his father when he was young, and that it had left his mother, Sylvia, emotionally fragile, or so he believed. I didn't meet Sylvia until about 6 months in. Daniel invited her over for dinner at my apartment. I cleaned everything twice, even replaced the cheap candles with something that smelled like eucalyptus and expensive hotels. She arrived in pearls and a cashmere shawl, her blonde hair perfectly set. She gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and handed me a gift bag with a bottle of wine I couldn't pronounce. "You're doing such a lovely thing, Emily," she said airily. "Teaching. I've always said it's important to have passions, even if they don't pay well." That was our beginning. After that night, Sylvia was always polite. Perfectly so. But it didn't take long to notice the things she never said around Daniel, and the things she only said when he wasn't around. "Are you sure you're ready to marry into our family, dear? Daniel's used to a certain kind of home. You're lovely, of course. But do you think it's wise to settle down so soon? What about your career? Teaching is sweet, but do you ever worry it'll hold Daniel back financially? He's a provider, you know." They were always phrased as questions. Suggestions. Said with a gentle hand on my arm or a half-smile over tea. But they were darts, each one sharpened with practiced charm. And I knew better than to call them out. Daniel never saw that side of her, and she knew exactly how to keep it that way. To him, she was his grieving mother, strong but sensitive. The woman who'd raised him alone after tragedy. The woman who had given everything for him. I didn't want to take that away from him. I didn't want to force him to see her the way I did. So I stayed silent. smiled through the dinners. Bit my tongue when she accidentally left me out of group messages or offered to help plan the wedding, then tried to change every decision we made. I told myself it would pass. That once we were married, she'd accept it. Accept me. I was wrong. Sylvia didn't want to be accepted. She wanted to be the center. And if she couldn't control the wedding, she would do everything she could to stop it. It started with small disruptions, tiny, precise interferences that were easy to dismiss. She forgot to RSVP to our engagement party, then showed up an hour late wearing white. When we toured venues, she insisted on tagging along and loudly questioned if Daniel's side of the family would feel comfortable in a place so modern. You know your father would have preferred something classic, she sighed dramatically, placing her hand over her heart as if invoking his ghost to vote on the color palette. She pushed for a church ceremony, even though Daniel and I had agreed on an outdoor wedding. For the tradition, she said, and the photos, of course. At one point, she emailed the florist directly and tried to change our flower order behind my back, then claimed she was just helping with logistics. But the worst part wasn't the meddling. It was the way she always made it seem like I was overreacting if I pushed back. Emily, she'd say sweetly, it was just a suggestion. Don't be so sensitive. Then she'd turn to Daniel and add, I'm only trying to help. I want your day to be perfect. She knew exactly what she was doing. Daniel, to his credit, tried to play peacekeeper. He told me to ignore her. She'll come around, he said. She's just nervous. She doesn't do well with change. But I knew better. This wasn't nerves. It was sabotage, masked as maternal concern. And then came the first episode. It was a Sunday dinner at our apartment, just 6 weeks before the wedding. Sylvia arrived with a scarf wrapped around her neck, moving slowly, dramatically. She barely touched her food. When I asked if she was feeling okay, she sighed heavily and said, I've just been having these dizzy spells lately. And this pressure here, she tapped her chest. I nearly fainted at the store last week. Daniel immediately went pale. Did you see a doctor? She hesitated. I don't want to worry anyone. But I'm scheduled for some tests. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He paced the apartment, called her twice, asked if he should come over. She waved him off. No, no. You just focus on your big day, she told him. Don't let your old mother get in the way. Over the next week, her condition mysteriously worsened. She claimed she couldn't get out of bed. She said the doctors were concerned about her heart. She hinted that she might not be well enough to attend the wedding at all. Then she started crying on the phone. I don't want to ruin this for you, Daniel, she whispered. But if something happens, I just want you to know I love you. It was perfectly executed. Subtle. Emotional. Designed to pull at his loyalty. And it worked. Daniel began to hesitate. Maybe we should postpone the wedding, he said one night. Just a few months. Until she's stable. I remember the way he said it, torn, guilty, but convinced he was doing the right thing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him how many coincidences it would take before he opened his eyes. But instead, I just said, let's give it a few more days. I want to check on her myself. So I did. I went to her house that Thursday afternoon. She didn't expect me. I rang the doorbell and waited. The video feed from her door camera, one of those smart ones she bragged about getting for security, buzzed through to her phone, and she answered it before opening the door. Oh, Emily, she said, surprised. Daniel didn't mention you were coming. I just wanted to drop off some soup, I said, lifting the paper bag. There was a long pause. I'm actually not feeling great, she said slowly. Maybe another time. I nodded politely. But I didn't leave. Instead, I stepped away, out of frame, and waited. What she didn't know was that Daniel had given me access to her doorbell camera months ago, just in case she ever needed help and couldn't answer. It had live video and cloud backup. I watched from my phone as, 2 minutes later, Sylvia opened the door. She didn't look weak. She didn't look dizzy. She wasn't even wearing the scarf. She stepped outside, stretched, then picked up a heavy flower pot from the porch and carried it to the side yard. She moved with the energy of someone 10 years younger. That was the moment I stopped questioning myself. This wasn't overprotectiveness. This wasn't miscommunication. This was a performance. And I was done playing along. That night, Daniel came home late from work, looking exhausted. He dropped his keys on the counter and loosened his tie, the weight of worry pressing into his shoulders. She called again, he said quietly. Cried this time. Said she was trying to be strong, but the doctors warned her about another episode. She doesn't think she can make it to the wedding. I stood by the sink, drawing a plate in slow, even circles. I didn't say anything right away. I just set the plate down gently, turned, and faced him. I believe it's time we get a second opinion, I said calmly. He frowned. What do you mean? I reached for my laptop on the dining table and opened it. I had already clipped the footage, 2 files, time-stamped, dated, clear as day. One showed Sylvia laughing on the phone, twirling in her kitchen while stirring a pot on the stove. The second showed her lifting a flower pot, one of those massive ceramic ones she'd bragged about at brunch, without a hint of strain. Daniel stared at the screen, silent. This was recorded 2 hours after she told you she'd nearly collapsed, I said. He blinked, lips parting. I don't understand. She's not sick, Daniel, I said softly. She's manipulating you. She's using illness the same way she uses concern, like a hook. And every time you bite, she reels you further from your own life. He sat down slowly, eyes still fixed on the screen. But the doctor, she said. She told the doctor she was fainting. She described symptoms that would get her flagged. The system did what it was supposed to, it issued caution. I paused. But no one saw what happened outside that office. No one except this camera. For a long time, Daniel said nothing. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant echo of our neighbors through the wall. I need to talk to her, he said finally, his voice hollow. No, I replied, steady. Not yet. Instead, I scheduled a meeting the next morning with Dr. Lauren Menendez, Sylvia's primary physician. I brought a printed transcript, the video files, and a copy of Sylvia's own messages about her symptoms. I didn't demand anything. I didn't accuse. I simply asked the doctor to review the evidence and help me understand what she was seeing versus what was being presented. Dr. Menendez, to her credit, remained professional. But I saw it in her eyes, the discomfort of realization. The slow recognition that she'd been played. She insisted the dizziness was constant, the doctor said, flipping through her notes. She said she couldn't stand for more than 5 minutes without blacking out. She stood in her yard for 20, I replied. In heels. Dr. Menendez sat back, quiet for a long moment. Emily, she said gently, this changes everything. She promised to call Daniel herself. She didn't want the information filtered or misinterpreted. She wanted him to hear the truth directly, with clarity. And that afternoon, she did. Daniel came home pale, eyes rimmed red, a silence hanging on him like a coat soaked in disbelief. She lied, he whispered, sinking into the couch. All of it. I nodded and sat beside him. I kept thinking maybe she was overreacting. Maybe it was anxiety. But she looked me in the eye, Emily. She said she wasn't sure she'd live long enough to see me married. She wanted to be the center, I said quietly. And when she couldn't win your attention honestly, she chose control. Daniel didn't say anything. He just reached over, took my hand, and held it like he was afraid I'd vanish too. But I didn't vanish. I stayed. I stayed because I knew the only way out of this wasn't through confrontation, it was through exposure. Quiet, factual, undeniable. The next morning, Daniel called Sylvia. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't yell. He simply told her that he knew the truth. That he'd seen the footage. That her doctor had confirmed the deception. There was a long silence on the line. Then came the shift. "You always take her side," Sylvia hissed, the mask finally cracking. "She's turned you against me." Daniel answered softly, but clearly. "No, Mom. You did that yourself." And just like that, the war she tried to stage fell apart, without a single scream, without a dramatic scene. Just the truth. And a screen. In the days that followed, Sylvia tried to recover control the only way she knew how, by rewriting the story. First came the phone calls. Tearful, gasping. "I was confused," she said. "The medication made me forget things." Then came the guilt. "I've been so lonely since your father passed. I just wanted to feel needed again." When those didn't work, she pivoted to threats cloaked in civility. "I don't think I'll attend the wedding," she told Daniel coldly over the phone. "It would be too awkward now. I wouldn't want to cause a scene on your special day." A pause, then a sigh. "Of course, some of the family might wonder why I wasn't invited." That was the moment I realized she hadn't given up, she was recalibrating. But I wasn't playing defense anymore. Daniel and I sat down that weekend with our planner and went over the guest list. We didn't erase her name out of pettiness, we removed it out of necessity. She had turned the wedding into a battlefield, and we weren't going to invite the person who laid the landmines. Instead, we moved the venue to a small historic house just outside Austin, with a backyard ceremony under a canopy of live oaks. Fewer guests. Simpler decor. No stage. No spotlight. Just us. In that quiet space, we rebuilt everything she had tried to unravel: our vows, our trust, our peace. A week before the wedding, a letter arrived. The handwriting was precise, the envelope heavy with perfume. Inside, a single line. "I hope you know what you're doing." No signature. I folded the letter once and dropped it into the trash. No emotion. No response. She had made herself perfectly clear. And now, so had we. Our wedding day came with the first breeze of spring, warm air, sun-dappled shadows, wildflowers lining the edge of the garden path. My dress wasn't extravagant, just soft and light, the kind that moves when you breathe. Daniel waited for me beneath the oak tree, eyes wide with awe, but steady. Always steady. When the music started, I didn't think about the empty chair that could have been hers. I thought about the one beside it, now filled by my former student's mother, a woman who had once told me, "If my daughter grows up to be like you, I'll have done something right." I thought about how, instead of bitterness, we'd chosen boundaries. Instead of silence, we'd chosen clarity. We said our vows without spectacle. No orchestration, no forced speeches. Just words spoken with trembling joy and a kind of stillness that only comes when you know you've protected something sacred. After the ceremony, Daniel and I walked into the evening hand in hand. No cameras. No pressure. Just the quiet hum of cicadas and the warmth of people who had shown up with love, not agendas. Later that night, as we sat by the fire pit, someone asked if we regretted not inviting Sylvia. Daniel looked at me. I looked at him. He answered first. "She was invited to every honest moment of my life," he said. "She just never wanted to show up for them." I squeezed his hand under the table. That was the thing about Sylvia, she never missed an opportunity to make something about her. But this day? This peace? This love? It wasn't hers to manipulate. It was ours. And we had earned every second of it. About a month after the wedding, Sylvia showed up at our front door. No call. No warning. Just her standing there in a pale pink sweater set in pearls, like she was dropping by for tea instead of showing her face after months of deceit. I opened the door slowly. She clutched a small white envelope and looked composed. Not ashamed. Not regretful. Just controlled, like she'd rehearsed whatever this was going to be. Emily, she said, with that familiar tilt of her head, that overly measured tone, I just wanted to say congratulations. I thought you might appreciate a wedding gift. She held out the envelope. Her hand didn't tremble. I didn't take it right away. Behind me, Daniel appeared. His face didn't harden, but something shifted in his eyes. Resolve. Clarity. Sylvia, he said. Why are you really here? She looked between us, lips pressing into a practiced smile. I've had time to think, she said. And maybe I wasn't fair. I only wanted what was best for you. That's not what you did, he said quietly. You lied. You faked being ill so you could sabotage our wedding. You tried to turn me against the woman I love. I made a mistake, she snapped suddenly, her mask cracking for the first time. I was scared. Everything was changing. I didn't want to lose you. Daniel didn't flinch. You didn't lose me because things changed, Mom. You lost me because you couldn't let go of control. I stood silently beside him, watching her shrink beneath the weight of her own actions, not because we lashed out, but because she finally saw that her usual tricks had no ground left to stand on. She reached out again with the envelope, her voice soft now. It's just a card, she said. And a check. I thought maybe you two could use it. For the house. Or the future. I took it this time, but I didn't look inside. Instead, I said, we don't need your money. We just needed your honesty. And it came too late. She blinked. For the first time, something flickered across her face, uncertainty. Daniel nodded once. You're welcome to be part of our lives. But only if you respect the boundaries. No more manipulation. No more guilt. Just truth. Sylvia stood frozen for a moment. Then, finally, she gave a single nod. I understand, she said. And this time I think maybe she did. She left without asking to come in. We closed the door and sat in silence for a few minutes, the envelope still unopened on the counter. Eventually, Daniel opened it. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note in Sylvia's signature handwriting. For the life you've chosen, even if I don't understand it. Mom. Daniel folded the check and set it in a drawer. We'll decide later, he said. But we both knew that money didn't matter. What mattered was that for the first time, she wasn't writing the script. We were. That week, I started teaching again. I returned to my classroom, my books, the warm chaos of second graders asking too many questions about butterflies and the solar system. And every day I came home to a man who looked at me like I was the safest place he'd ever known. One night, as we cooked dinner, Daniel paused while chopping garlic and said, You know, if you hadn't shown me that footage, I might still be apologizing for things I didn't do. I turned to him and smiled. You saw the truth when you were ready. That's all I needed. He looked at me for a long moment. No, he said. You didn't need me to see it. You stood up anyway. He was right. Because that was the moment I'd realized something about love and power. It's not about who cries the loudest. It's about who stays the calmest when everything around them is designed to make them feel small. And I hadn't just stayed calm. I'd stayed me. It's been almost a year since the wedding. The house is quiet tonight. There's a soft breeze moving through the backyard, carrying the smell of rosemary and cedar. Daniel is inside, reading on the couch with his feet tucked under a blanket I knitted last fall. There's no noise. No tension. Just peace. And it didn't come from winning a battle. It came from refusing to fight one on someone else's terms. Sylvia didn't disappear completely. She still calls sometimes, cautiously, politely, like someone trying to learn a new language after years of speaking only in control. We keep the conversation short. Sometimes she asks about the garden. Sometimes she asks about Daniel's work. But she doesn't ask to come over. And she never brings up the wedding. she knows, now, that we don't operate on guilt. There are days I still think about the old version of me, the version that second-guessed everything, that wondered if I was being too sensitive, or if I was just imagining things. The version that tried so hard to belong that I let people walk through me like I was transparent. But that version of me no longer lives here. She was replaced by someone who learned the most powerful word in the English language. No. No to gaslighting. No to manipulation. No to sacrificing my boundaries to protect someone else's comfort. Sometimes the people who hurt you don't yell. They whisper. They smile when they strike. They cry when they're caught. But just because someone fakes fragility doesn't mean they deserve to be handled gently. Because real fragility doesn't try to destroy others on its way down. A few weeks ago, I received a card from one of my students. It was hand-drawn, misspelled, and perfect. Thank you for showing me how to be brave. I didn't cry when I read it. I smiled. Because for the first time I understood that bravery isn't loud. It's not confrontation. It's not revenge. It's the quiet decision to stand in the truth, even if you're the only one in the room doing it. And if anyone ever asks me what really happened between me and my mother-in-law, I won't rant. I'll just say, she tried to play the victim. But I showed the doctor the footage. And the truth did the rest. And that's how I learned that clarity is stronger than chaos. That sometimes, dignity is the best kind of revenge. What would you have done if someone tried to sabotage your wedding with lies? Have you ever stayed quiet when you should have stood up? Let me know in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And always remember, boundaries don't push people away. They reveal who was never willing to meet you with respect. And that's how I learned that the loudest lies often fall quiet when you hold up a mirror. Some people fake weakness to hold on to power. But the truth? It doesn't shout. It just stands there, undeniable. Have you ever dealt with someone who weaponized guilt? What would you have done if it were your wedding? Leave a comment. Share this with someone who's learning to protect their peace. And follow for more true stories of smart, silent revenge.